Well, I did 3 degrees in university, one in literature poetry, one in psychology, and one in history and comparative religion. And I was a very curious person, so I studied many subjects. Every subject I studied led back to Bharat, back to India as its home. Whether it was chemistry, whether it was physics, whether it was psychology, all the psychologists were learning things from India, whether it was scholarship, whether it was language. So all the roads led not to Rome, but to Bharat.
All roads may not lead to India anymore, as India's own intellectual traditions are now being claimed elsewhere. Does India realize that its so-called soft power is not completely owned by it anymore? Without even visiting or knowing India, India's own soft power is being consumed, utilized, and exploited by many across the world. Yoga can be a good example. Across the world, many are practicing yoga without necessarily knowing its dharmic and Indian roots. Perhaps yoga was never supposed to originally act as a soft power, as it is more about empowering oneself to unite with the divine. But yoga increasingly started to be seen as a type of soft power when Americans Americanized it. Globally, America has the biggest chunk in the commercial yoga industry. Not only that, accreditation of your yoga school with a renowned USA-based organization adds a lot of value, no matter which part of the world your yoga school is in. India may have a greater number of people practicing yoga, but in proportions, it is America which is more likely to come out on top. It can even be said that gradually, yoga is becoming an American soft power. And the nation from the part of the world where the spiritual practice was originally born is trying to reclaim yoga by its better late than never kind of initiatives like International Yoga Day. The Americanization of yoga has also hurt yoga's spiritual dharmic roots. Yoga's ethos are being diluted right in front of us. The 2016 Yoga in America study, which was conducted by Yoga Journal and Yoga Alliance to understand the practice of yoga in America and to determine how Americans view yoga, didn't even have India mentioned once in it. Though the study aimed to check how Americans view yoga, it didn't ask the participants any questions about its roots or origins. Interestingly, one of the key findings of the study was that yoga is an increasing part of American life. No, I am not suggesting a change in the questions of that study, but as an observer, I find it very interesting that yoga is being discussed, taught, and consumed without discussing India. Can India claim today that yoga is its exclusive soft power? Perhaps it has already lost that opportunity. Is it right to say that yoga is now an American soft power as much as it is India's?
It depends on who's teaching it. And there's no way to exercise quality control in any forcible way at this point. Perhaps we could say that this is also the case in India, in Bharat, that we don't try to use force to insist that people teach a particular way. But if you go back to the Vedas, to the library of knowledge that is behind yoga, there are particular ways of doing things. Some teachers are endeavoring to adhere to that because their teacher told them to. Others are at a more casual stage. Some are actually trying to brand it as something that wasn't even from India. So there's a large number of kinds of persons who are coming to yoga. The good news is they're all coming to yoga.
The 2016 Yoga in America study also found that yoga practitioners are more likely to have a good sense of balance and are keener to give back to community. They also become highly concerned about their health and the environment. Half of practitioners live green and eat sustainably. It is important to point out that while enjoying the benefits of India's dharmic disciplines, many Westerners continue to shame the same dharmic disciplines by restricting it to cows. Why? How can one hate the love for cows but love the love for yoga when both cow and yoga are parts of the same dharmic understanding of the world? How? Well, one can do so by recklessly restricting Hinduism to cows and by disconnecting yoga's connection with Hinduism. So, is it really happening? This is Philadelphia. For many years, through her advocacy, Suhag Shukla has tried to conquer hate by reason, love, and compassion.
Both the understanding of India as well as Hinduism is deeply misrepresented and misunderstood in this country. There are aspects about our culture and our tradition that are known about, such as yoga or Ayurveda, and there's probably good understandings of that, but oftentimes there's a disconnect between where these traditions came from or the full understanding of them as a spiritual discipline. But generally speaking, whether we're talking about the earliest introduction to India and Hinduism, which occurs in the United States in public schools and in private schools around 6th grade or 7th grade, all the way to the college level where students are learning about Hinduism perhaps at a higher level, or the general public and their understanding of India and Hinduism through the media, there's oftentimes caricatured understandings or very surface level understandings that don't necessarily go into the complexities of things or oversimplify and fall back on tired stereotypes that I think still plague the global understanding of Hinduism in India, a understanding that is still largely colored by colonial narratives.
Many Hindu Americans feel very uncomfortable by the way their spiritual discipline is perceived.
We still are perceived in stereotypes. We're seen either as the model minority, as very bright, brilliant people who are expected to be very good at math and very good at science. And I think we are also still perceived as an exotic people, as a people that come from a country that few have been to, few understand, believing in a religion that is really not understood. You still, when we do surveys of how people think about Hinduism or what they know about Hinduism, it still comes back to those same stereotypes of caste and cows and curry, and it seems almost trite in order to say that, but in fact it still is the reality that people don't connect Hinduism with its greatest contributions of yoga, of meditation, of its medical breakthroughs and advances, Ayurveda, or even surgical advances, the pioneering work that was done by Sushruta. These things are still not connected to the Hindu tradition.
It can be said that one of the most effective ways to remove misunderstandings about Hinduism in America is through education. But how can you educate people when in American textbooks Hinduism is shown in a very poor light? Is it right to say that through their own education system, Americans learn how bad Hinduism is?
When we talk about education, perhaps the most important thing is our work with textbooks, because we know that many times a person's very first introduction to a religion is, say, in middle school when they start teaching world religions. And we want to make sure that Hinduism is exposed appropriately. Historically, because Hindus have not been at the table when these things are fleshed out, many mistruths, half-truths, outright falsehoods have crept into chapters on Hinduism.
Yoga is about experiencing union with the divine. It cannot be separated from the dharmic ideas of reincarnation and karma. But it should also be stressed that regardless of the beneficiary's religion or nationality, yoga can benefit anyone. The next 30 seconds of this episode can help you in realizing how limited your understanding of yoga is. The earliest mention of yoga can be found in Rig Veda, and Patanjali is considered the father of yoga. The four paths of yoga are Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Raj Yoga. Raj Yoga can be further classified into 8 steps. From this list, in my experience, an average Westerner's understanding of yoga is generally limited to 4C, 4D, and to some extent 4G. After spending 17 years in the Silicon Valley as a corporate speaker and in sales and marketing position of various companies, Jeffrey has finally found comfort in the world of inner exploration. Today, he is a well-known spiritual master who has celebrated the true sense of yoga. But on the other hand, yoga's growing popularity in the Western world has also opened the floodgates for those who are driven by greed, deceit, and commercial interests. In the West, there are sections which have tried to make yoga their own patented property. There are sections which have even tried to rename ancient Indian yoga techniques. There are sections which have launched weird-sounding things like beer yoga and goat yoga. There are sections which have even tried to Christianize yoga. And then finally, there are sections which have said many negative things about Hinduism and yoga. India's yoga has now reached American hands. For centuries, Hindus have freely shared their intellectual dharmic heritage of yoga with the rest of the world. Little did they know that something that they shared freely would be later commercialized and corrupted in such a big way that it could even dilute the authentic system of yoga. In the interest of humankind, it is important to preserve the authenticity of yoga, and if there is still a country in the world where yoga can be fully understood and preserved, it is India. In that sense, the most reputed institutions which give accreditations to yoga schools should belong to India. And if yoga is going to be seen as a soft power, it should remain India's soft power, because that is the only way yoga will remain yoga. Hi, my name is Karolina Goswami. I am doing my best to find accurate and authentic answers regarding many cultural aspects of India which are not fully known or understood. It takes a lot of time, money and effort to do this work. Please come forward and support my mission financially. See you again.